So we've talked a little bit about over-the-counter pain relievers, which are probably what you've been most familiar with up to this point. We're going to talk a little bit about prescription drugs, at least the prescription medicine industry, and also a little bit about how drugs are developed, the different ways that they can be developed. So that'll be this section. So, prescription medicines are huge business. Every year in the US alone, there are more than 4 billion prescriptions. Think about that, 4 billion prescriptions. That's crazy. I myself, I'm not currently on any prescriptions, but my husband takes four. So, it's just amazing to see how many there are. There's annual sales of $320 billion per year. And some of that has actually been due to the use of commercials. Commercials have been allowed for prescription medicines since 2008. Before that, they couldn't be on TV. I always think it's kind of funny whenever you're watching TV and one of these commercials comes on and then they give the list of side effects, and that list of side effects is over half of the commercial. I actually have a link at the bottom. That was one for Humira. So that particular one is a drug that's used sometimes for like rheumatoid arthritis and different things like that. I actually had a rash on my back that I went and had looked at, and I've had it for years and years and years and years. And so I talked to the dermatologist, and they actually suggested that I go on Humira. It turns out it's one that's used a lot for skin conditions. I'm not necessarily anti-prescription, but I think there are a lot of prescriptions that are prescribed that they don't necessarily weigh all the side effects. So in case you're curious, I couldn't get it hyperlinked, but it's down the bottom. Check it out, see what you think. So let's see here. So how are different prescriptions, how are those drugs designed? How do they figure them out? Well, there's different ways that you can design a drug. So I have that down there at the bottom. So we have what's called rational drug design. Rational drug design is whenever you have a specific biological molecule that you know is involved in causing a disease. So you're going to design a molecule to interact with that specific biological molecule. So you know what you're trying to affect, so you design a molecule special for that one. High throughput screening, what this one does is they make just a ton of different compounds and they apply robotics to screen thousands and thousands of compounds. So they do a whole bunch and then they allow the robotics to kind of filter through and say, hey, this might have some promise. Serendipity is just by chance. Penicillin was discovered by chance. Penicillin has a great history. Read up about it. It's kind of a fun little story there. Saccharin was the same way. A lot of this is by serendipity. And then we have what are called chemical modifications, and that's actually what we started with in this chapter, looking at aspirin. So we have an existing drug, but we're going to modify that drug to increase the efficiency and or reduce the side effects. So we want to make it more effective, or we want to get rid of some of the bad things. However, things don't always happen the way that we want them to. Now, this particular look at drug development kind of deals with that high throughput where they're testing thousands of different compounds. So we screen a whole bunch of different compounds, and then we're going to try to really reduce the number that we actually have to test, because the testing is very expensive and it takes a long time. Now it's estimated that it takes a particular molecule, a particular drug, 15 years or more from development to shelf. And for the research and development portion of it, it's about $1 billion for each drug that's produced. The greatest cost of that is actually dealing with the clinical trials, to where you're actually testing on humans. So down at the bottom, we have a little graph here. Again, this is the high throughput ones where they're testing a whole bunch of different compounds. And out of 10,000 compounds, they find about 250 that are kind of interesting. And so then they go through this 250, they do a little bit more research on it, a little bit more thought process, and they get it down to 5. And of those 5, we start doing some sort of clinical trials. We start with the small clinical trials and we build up. And as we build up, we start eliminating those drugs that aren't working well. So from these 5 to 10,000 compounds that we started with, we end up with one FDA approved drug. Again, this is going to take some time, up to, well, about 15 years and about $1 billion. Wow, think about that. $1 billion. It's no wonder that the pharmaceutical companies really want to be able to promote the drug that they have. Now, as they start doing, especially those clinical trials, they're going to do something called a double-blind study. So the idea here is that you have 2 groups. You have a control group and you have a test group. But you want to make sure that the people taking the medicines don't know which group they're in, because the people that know that they're taking the medicine are going to say, yeah, it's working. And the people that are in the control group, if they know they're in the control group and they know they're not actually getting the medicine, well, they shouldn't feel better. But whenever you do the research, it turns out some of them say that they do feel better than they had. So that control group is going to be given a placebo. A placebo is an inert substance used as a control. It's kind of like when you're a little kid and your mom said, oh, honey, you fell and you scraped your knee. Here, take this piece of candy, you'll feel better. Did the piece of candy actually make you feel better? Well, sometimes just the hug and the kiss from mom makes you always feel better. The piece of candy really didn't do anything. But you didn't know it was just a piece of candy. I'll admit it, I've tried to give my kids Smarties and say that they were medicine before. You shouldn't do that. It's a really bad habit to start into, but it does happen. So if you give someone to somebody and they think it's going to make them feel better, the mind is very, very powerful, and you could get what's called a placebo effect. So the placebo is given to the control group, and then the test group is given the actual medicine. And they want to be able to see if there is a statistical difference in how those 2 groups behave. So in a double-blind study, we want to make sure, again, that the people don't know which one that they're taking. But it's going to actually extend beyond that. What about the person handing them the drug? What if that person knows whether or not they're given the medicine or the placebo? Will anything in their behavior clue that person in? So we want to make sure that that person has no idea if the volunteer is getting the actual medicine or the placebo. So the only one who actually knows who's being given what is somebody that is kind of behind the scenes, that doesn't actually interact with the volunteers, that's coding all of the different medicines. So that's why it talks about an independent third party codes each pill and maintains the plan for their distribution. So again, we want to see if the real drug is significantly different than placebo. Lots and lots of statistics done in this particular area. So remember how we said it takes about $1 billion. Oh man, that's just so crazy. $1 billion for a drug to go all the way through the research and development process. Now, to help the pharmaceutical company regain some of that, to be able to be encouraged to spend that much money, they will get a patent on that particular drug. Now, these patents will last about 20 years, and that starts once they're invented. Now, normally, I know we said it takes about 15 years to go from, initial to final approval here. It's only about the last 8 years that the patent is gonna start. So a drug company has about 10 years on average of the medicine as what they call a name brand medicine. Now, after their patent expires, it's considered to be a generic medicine. So you can still get the name brand stuff, but all the other companies can also use that chemical formulation to be able to make their generic version. Chemically, they're equivalent to one another. It's the same active ingredients. The inert ingredients might be a little bit different. They might package it a little bit different. They may make more of a multi-purpose one by combining a couple different things together. But that particular one compound is chemically equivalent, but it's going to be a lot less expensive. So I have an example down there at the bottom. This is for a cholesterol lowering medication called Lipitor. My husband's been on Lipitor for many years. Actually, he's now on a different one, but Lipitor is the one they started with. And today you can get it in a generic form. If you go to buy the brand name, it costs $143 per month. $143. If you get the generic atorvastatin, it's only $34 per month. Same amount, same dosage, same everything. But do you get the name brand or do you get the generic? My mom is kind of on that pre-diabetic, slightly diabetic side right now. And so there is a new medication which does a shot to your stomach, and you give it like once a week, I believe that's right, or once a month. I don't remember which it is now. Without insurance, it was going to be over $800 a month for that one medication. Luckily, her insurance started covering it, and it reduced it down to about $30 or $40 a month. But that is where the pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money. So name brand versus generic.